Good morning, and welcome to the second session in the Essential Skills to Build Your Business series, hosted by Manitoba Agriculture and the Manitoba Women's Enterprise Centre on mastering negotiation. My name is Annette Allen. I am a business development specialist with the value-added branch of Manitoba Agriculture. I would like to start this webinar with a land acknowledgement. We recognize that Manitoba is on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota Oyate, Denesalin, and Nehethawuk peoples. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. It is my pleasure today to introduce today's speaker, Joanne Zuk of Joanne Zuk Leadership and Strategy. Joanne is a strategist and negotiation expert who brings humor, stories, and practical wisdom to a topic that most would happily avoid: negotiation. As an entrepreneur herself, and with a decade of experience teaching negotiation at the post-secondary level, Joanne brings important advice and tools to help entrepreneurs get past their discomfort and negotiate with confidence. Joanne's goal is to help individuals open a door to self-advocacy that can never be shut. One where setting boundaries and asking for more becomes not just an aspiration, but a strong foundation on which one can build thriving businesses. Joanne is based in Winnipeg and grew up in rural Manitoba. You can find her free negotiation course for entrepreneurs on YouTube and connect with her on LinkedIn and Instagram. Her first book on negotiation for entrepreneurs will be in bookstores this fall. Today, Joanne will share some tips on how to build confidence in negotiating in new and more complex situations as your business grows. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to do the share the screen step right there. Annette, can you just give me a thumbs up and let me know that you can see that right now? Yes, perfect. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm actually not in Manitoba right now. I'm traveling a bit, and so I find myself in the beautiful lands of Nanaimo, BC. And so I know Annette that you shared a land acknowledgement, but I also want to acknowledge that I'm today sitting on the unceded territories of the Snuneymuxw, the Snanawas, and Tsuminas. I was practicing that before, but these are very challenging names to pronounce of those nations here in this area. Today, mastering negotiation. I'm excited to talk to you about this. Annette and I have been, talking about doing something like this for a couple of years now, because a few years ago, I actually did some research with Manitoba Agriculture, and we interviewed folks who were entrepreneurs. We interviewed people in the food development space, so grocers and distributors and packagers and all of the people who are working to support you as entrepreneurs. And so it's exciting to me to both bring you a little bit of insight from those conversations, but also share some content that's going to start you on your negotiation journey. So the first thing I want to share is that, this really is really important to understand. Entrepreneurs who avoid negotiation can't actually build profitable businesses. Now, this might raise a little bit of hackles, but the truth is negotiation is one of the core skills that you need to build and develop over time to run not just a business, but a profitable business. And as entrepreneurs, that's what we want to build is, we absolutely want to do things for our families and our communities. And ultimately that profit that we generate in our businesses allows us to do more. So breaking this down, it's important to think about, we are all struggling right now with the cost of goods, and your profit is a direct relationship between the price a customer is willing to pay and the costs that you are accruing as a business owner. I have gone grocery shopping recently. I assume you eat food, and that you've gone grocery shopping recently, and costs of everything are increasing. In the retail world, margins are really thin. So margins being the amount of money that the retailers make when they're selling your products. And our consumers are becoming more and more cautious, and they're being very deliberate about where they're willing to spend their dollars. So it's important for you to really maximize the profit. And negotiation is a skill that can actually allow you to do that. So a few minutes ago, I said that in 2022, we did a research study, and we talked to, I think it was about 20 folks in the food development sector. And I heard some really interesting things in these interviews. So especially women were uncomfortable negotiating in their businesses. So they talked to me. The first thing that they would say was, I didn't even want to come to this interview because it just makes me uncomfortable to talk about negotiation. They also often felt taken advantage of, overwhelmed and intimidated when they found themselves in the situation where they had to negotiate. So I talked to women who were newer in business. I talked to women who had been in the food development world for 5, 10, 15 years. And it didn't matter. And this was the interesting thing. It didn't matter how long they had been an entrepreneur. It didn't matter how old they were. They were uncomfortable negotiating. They felt vulnerable being in that space. So if you feel like that, you are absolutely not alone. Now, this research study was on women entrepreneurs, but we also know that folks from historically marginalized backgrounds absolutely experience the same kinds of things. The reality is, for your whole life, you've probably been made to feel like you have to make yourself smaller for other people. And that contributes to a different kind of negotiation behavior, and specifically a fear of negotiation. So as Annette said, I'm a teacher, a speaker. I've taught at the University of Winnipeg and Red River College. I have a project that I call the Fearless Negotiation Project, where I create free resources for women and historically marginalized folks on YouTube. I speak at conferences. There's lots of writing and articles on my website. And I am working on that book that I'm hoping to have that hit the bookshelves this fall, but timelines are always iffy. Today, what we are going to cover is these three things. We're going to cover lots, but these are the three nuggets. What's negotiation and where can you do it? This is important because so many people that I talked to had no idea. They couldn't even see the opportunities for negotiation. So we're going to talk about every opportunity within the food development world where you're going to see the opportunity to negotiate. We're going to get to the heart of why it's so hard, especially for women, and for folks from historically marginalized backgrounds. So what is that, and how do I get over that is the big question that always get asked. And how do I negotiate for anything really effectively? On the screen is a QR code. And so if you open up your camera and take and put your camera close to it, it'll give you the option to open up that website. If you'd like a download of this particular presentation, it's there. If you're watching this video on the recording, we will just make available this presentation. But rather than have to take notes and copy down everything that I put in this presentation, you can just go to that website and download. You sign up your name, and I will send you the presentation immediately. I'll also send you some extra resources that I can't cover today. So that QR code will appear a few times throughout this presentation. If you miss it now, or you're like, I don't need it, but you find you want it later, it will be there for you. So we're going to cover what looks like a little bit, but it's actually a lot. First, I want to talk to you about where you can negotiate. And I want to encourage you to think about negotiation not as something that you do once a year in your business, but something that you do every single day. It's something that you should be doing personally. You should be doing it with your family. You should be doing it with your friends, with your community. I was just laughing and saying I wasn't really negotiating with my husband. I'm in the hotel room, and he was still sleeping 10 minutes before I logged onto this Zoom call. But negotiating with your family about the things that you need for you to be successful. And absolutely, if you are in a business, you're running a small business, you need time, you need your family's support. And so using the skills of negotiation to have those hard conversations and say, listen, I need us to work together. And so what I need is more time. I need maybe more time for sharing some of the household responsibilities. And maybe I cook dinner once a week, but the rest of the family pitches in and does that work other times. So I want you to think about negotiating regularly. It is really about cultivating radical self-respect. And as women, we are often taught to put ourselves behind everyone else, but actually asking for what we need is the first step. Identifying what we need and then asking for it's the first step in successful negotiation. So practice that in places where you're not worried that you're not going to get a business deal, where there isn't a high level of risk on the table for you. So personally, I want you to think about negotiating, and then professionally with really anybody that you come into contact with. So suppliers, partners, we're going to go through them all in a second here, but you should think about always understanding what is the position, what is the thing that you need from that other person, what's the ideal that you need from that other person, and ensure that you're going into those conversations knowing what that is. Now, people often misunderstand what negotiation is, and we think about it in the context of hostage negotiation or negotiation of divorce, or really like aggressive and confrontational kinds of situations. But negotiation is just a conversation. It's a conversation where two people come together, they have different perspectives and priorities, and they work to create a mutually beneficial agreement. So if you have a product and you're trying to get that into a retail store, you're having a conversation with a grocer and talking to them about what your product is going to give them. It's going to give them the opportunity to make some money, and they are trying to obviously get maybe the quantities or the delivery schedule, the cost from you. You have different needs, and you're going to have a conversation to be able to come to an agreement that works for both of you. It's not about win-lose. It's actually about creating a really healthy relationship between the two of you. So in food development specifically, there are so many places that you can negotiate. And I won't go through all of the details here. You'll get this in the, you'll have a copy of this if you download the presentation, but with your suppliers, and this is going to be one of your big costs, right? With your suppliers, it's not just price, it's delivery schedule, it's inventory. Maybe you don't have space to store inventory, but you're able to get a regular delivery schedule if you negotiate that with them. The quality of the product, the volume of the product. Many of you will be working in commercial kitchens, and so there's opportunity to negotiate things like, booking times, the ability to store your product or your raw materials, the opportunity to sell your product in the canteen if it happens to be a community space. There are packaging suppliers you'll work with. And again, price, schedule, quality, volume, those ones will often come up. And it's important for you to understand what matters to you. What's going to make this a good relationship. Many of you will start your journey working and selling your product at farmers markets. So you can negotiate things like, which table you get, the cost or the commitment. Maybe if you commit to a full season, you can get a reduced cost. But prime location is a big one. Food distributors, things like timing, minimum quantities, and obviously price. Again, price always comes up, but it is not always the most important thing to the people that you're negotiating with. With retailers, yeah, other than price and volume, things like shelf location, opportunities to promote your product. And with other partners, I think about, uh, um, I want to say the Women's Enterprise Center, but they just rebranded WeMB and Manitoba Agriculture, just access to coaching and support and connections. Sometimes, learning to ask, and some of this is just asking, it's not necessarily negotiating, but asking for connection to somebody in the sector can be a really powerful way of advancing your business. So you have many, many, many places that you can negotiate. And I want you to think about practicing it in safe environments. So with your family, on that board that you're working on, with your community. I wrote a really great blog on negotiating with my family over, who is going to make holiday dinner a few years ago. So you can go find that one on my website. But negotiation is truly a skill that we can use every single day. Now, the meat of this presentation, why is it so hard? Why does it suck so badly? I talked to those women in food development, and nothing that they said surprised me, that they felt afraid, they felt anxious, they didn't like it. They felt like it was going to ruin a relationship. It was going to make them, feel inauthentic. It's hard for three reasons. Number one is you don't know how to do it. We don't learn how to negotiate. We are never really taught how to do that. The only places where you can learn negotiation are places where I taught it in business school or law school or conflict resolution. Those are the three spaces where you can learn how to do that. We should be teaching young people how to do this in elementary school, but we're not. So you don't know how to do it. So we're going to cover that today. I'm going to teach you the 4 steps. The second thing, and this is a big one, is you tend to make it personal, especially if you're a woman or you come from a historically marginalized background. You make it personal, and it's not personal. It doesn't have to be personal. And the third one is you're not leaning into your strengths. So we're going to talk about all 3 of these topics, and I'm going to teach you how to do it really, really well. So first, 4 steps to negotiate anything. And I've got lots of detail on the next screen. So if you haven't if you haven't captured that QR code, go and do that now. So negotiating everything is 4 steps. You got a plan, discovery, and I'll explain that in a minute, have a discussion, and then confirmation. You cannot skip a step. So I don't care if you're negotiating with your partner, if you're negotiating with your kids, if you're negotiating with Costco retail. These are the 4 steps that you need to take. So let's talk about planning. Planning is the prep. Planning is the thing that you sit down when you get a meeting with Costco retail and you sit down and you brainstorm. What is your dream list? What do you want? What do you want to get out of this? What would be amazing? But also, what do you not want? What are things that they're not part of the package that you offer, or what you're willing to offer as part of that agreement. So not a food related event, but one of the things that I love is opportunities like this, webinars, the opportunity to speak to many people at the same time, keynote speeches, that kind of thing. What I don't want is a lot of one-on-one practice. And part of that reason for me is that I do a lot of travel. And so it's difficult to manage a schedule with a lot of one-on-one coaching clients. So I don't do that anymore, except on really, really specific situations. So understanding what you want and don't want walking in gives you knowledge that you can use in that conversation. Also, what are your deal breakers and minimum requirements? And at the bottom of this slide, I say, do the math. You need to understand that the profitability of your product. If you're selling to Costco and unfortunately what they're able to offer you is not something that makes you a profit, then that's a really difficult decision of whether you're going to break even, and make no profit just to get the exposure. And we do see that. And that might be a strategic decision for you, but you need to know what the deal breakers are. What's the point at which you have to say no because it's no longer a good deal for you? What are the minimum requirements? And then what are you willing to give up? So understanding what really, of all the things that you could offer up, what are you willing to give up? And what's top of that list? So that's planning. Discovery. This is also a step that often gets missed. We jump into negotiation, that discussion part. And the discovery part is the part where you actually figure out how to make the match work. So part of this is research, and I want you to ask others. So if you're negotiating with farmers market or a supplier, talk to others. There's power in community. Talk to others about their experience to understand what tends to matter to that other person, that person across the table. What's important to them? Is it just price, or is it that they have no space and they want you to store your goods elsewhere? Understanding and then asking them once you get into the conversation, what actually matters to them? What's the most important thing that they would get out of this agreement? And also sometimes it's estimating and taking a guesstimate at it, but what might they be willing to give up? So I really recommend you do research here in advance. And then once you get into a conversation, you ask questions to really discover what's driving them. What is that interest that they have in terms of bringing you on, or working with you? Next up is discussion. And this is the negotiation. This is the conversation where you're going back and forth. You're sharing what matters to you. I always recommend you look for some easy yeses, look for alignment. So if something that really matters to them isn't really important to you, that's an easy opportunity for a yes. Get some of those like written down and agreed to early, and it'll make some of the other negotiable items that are maybe a little bit harder, maybe price. You've already built some trust and agreement in place before you tackle those big hard ones. Ideally, you want to trade concessions of equal value. So when you're doing that, the preparing, you need to understand your numbers. You need to, and I know you've got a module here on financials, but you need to understand what it's going to cost you to deliver on different things. And sometimes that means that you need to take the conversation and say, I want to go back and run some numbers. And then let's pick up this conversation tomorrow or later this afternoon, because I want to make sure that this is profitable for me. Now, me saying that probably made you uncomfortable because of the things we'll talk about in a minute, these blind spots that we have, this deep need to be liked. This is a business deal. This is a contract that you're going to engage in. It's important for you to make sure that you are doing your due diligence. So, if you're giving up a lot, and getting very little, that agreement is not going to be fruitful or sustainable for you in the future, and it's probably not going to be profitable for the long term. It's okay to keep the negotiation going. Not all negotiations are one conversation. They might be 4 or 5 or 6. In my business now, it's usually 6 or 7 conversations before we land at a final agreement. Food development, it will vary depending on who that person is. It might be a quick conversation. You agree to the terms. It's fine. It's not complicated. But the bigger the cost, the bigger the dollar figure and commitment, the longer it should really take, and that's okay. The final step, and often we skip this, mostly people just jump into the discussion. They jump into the negotiation. They avoid doing the preparation, and they forget to do the confirmation. You need to get this in writing. And all of your legal friends will tell you this. Ideally, you want a contract. Minimum standards would be an email that you send saying, these were the things we agreed to. Do you agree to that? That is a contract of sort. But you need to get this in writing because these terms are ultimately binding, and you're expecting the things that you've negotiated to be in there. So get it in writing. Make sure you double check the contract. If you have agreed to a particular maybe delivery schedule or volume discount, make sure that that is actually written into the contract. Otherwise, it's just a verbal. And then the hardest thing, again, because we really want to be liked, is holding them accountable for the terms. So if they were supposed to deliver 3 times a week to your commercial kitchen, and they're not doing that, you've got to hold them accountable. So you need to make sure that there's a clause in that contract that has a penalty for them, or it reduces their price or something, but that you're calling them on it. You're not waiting to hope that they follow through. Negotiation's a hard step for a lot of people. I want you to make sure you get what you did that hard thing and negotiated for. So why does it suck? Well, it sucks primarily if you're a woman or you come from a historically marginalized background, because you were raised to be polite and kind and grateful and humble and generous and a people pleaser. So there's very little negotiation research that's been done on women or people from historically marginalized backgrounds. But what we do know is that there is a significant change that happens by grade 2. Before grade 2, girls and boys, or kids raised as girls and boys, negotiate exactly the same. And if you have children, you know what I'm talking about. They ask for the world. Hey, what do you want to do this afternoon? Let's go to Disneyland, right? The kids don't have a concept of not asking for what they want. They don't have a filter. But by the age of 7, by grade 2, girls statistically stop negotiating. They stop asking for what they want. And it gets worse and worse over time. This leads to, in the workforce, this leads to women not asking for promotions, not asking for raises. And it's largely because they were socialized in school to be polite, to be grateful, to be humble, to be generous, and to be people pleasers. And this affects us for our whole lives. And this is where that guilt and that discomfort is coming from because of where and how you were raised. So there are 5 blind spots. And again, here's your QR code if you haven't downloaded that this piece yet. So five blind spots: gratitude, humility, generosity, trust, and people pleasing. And I did make some notes here because I want to go through a couple of examples with you. So gratitude. So gratitude, I hear this as, I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I don't want to, I don't want them to think I'm not grateful. If I'm going to ask for more, I'm going to ask for what it is that I want. When I did the interviews with food development entrepreneurs a few years ago, I spoke with one person who found herself in a situation with a local retailer that had been the first to kind of give her a break and place her product in the store. And the product took off. It was doing really well. She was moving into other markets, but she felt reluctant to go back to that retail outlet and say, hey, you know what? All of these other retail outlets are paying this level for my product, and I'm raising my fees to that for you, because she was so grateful that that organization had given her, her first opportunity. Remember, this retail outlet is making money from selling her products, and they're making a higher margin because they're selling a lot of her product. So that's an example of how gratitude can really shift our behavior. We don't even know that it's happening, but it had not struck her as even a reasonable ask to go back and say, hey, our contract is coming up. I am going to raise my prices to be consistent with everyone else. She would have continued to offer that low cost probably forever, because gratitude was a blind spot for her. It didn't allow her to see that she was making a really poor business decision because of an emotional connection. Humility is another big one. And in this case, you might think, I don't want them to think I'm arrogant, right? The reality is, again, this is a business. This is a business. This isn't a hobby. This is a business. And you need to understand your numbers. It's not arrogant to know your numbers and ensure that you have profit and make decisions based on that. But we often get sidelined by this idea that, we almost the teenage girls in us. We don't want people to think that we're arrogant, we're too big for our britches. And because of that, we wait, and we step back, and we wait to be noticed, or we wait to be acknowledged. So humility is one. Generosity is a third one. I spoke with another woman in food development who was caught in this nasty cycle, and many of you have probably experienced this, of community organizations coming and saying, hey, could you sponsor our sports team, or could you sponsor this event, and can you donate product? And this entrepreneur found herself being really generous because she didn't want others to feel like that she was greedy, or she wasn't contributing in that way. And so over time, she moved to a model where she would donate product in response to product that the community had purchased, because her just giving away her product was costing her business many, many thousands of dollars every year. But again, that need, that drive to be generous is something that gets in our way. Trust is another one, and I will talk about this later, but we often believe that that the other person across the table has our best interests at heart. When you're negotiating with a local community retailer or or a community kitchen or another organization that is very community based, we can often assume that they're applying the value of community to their relationships. And maybe that's the case sometimes, but we can't assume that. And we certainly can't assume that the biggest worry that they have is that you're going to make money as an entrepreneur. They're worried about making money from their perspective. They're worried about making sure that they meet their targets. By far, the thing that kind of comes up the most is this nature of people pleasing. And I rarely have met a woman who wouldn't describe herself as a people pleaser or a recovering people pleaser. Again, this goes back to being socialized. The worst thing that you could experience on the playground is not being liked. And so this is a response. This is a defense mechanism that we develop when we're very young, and we continue to play into these behaviors throughout our lives. But one thing that I did hear from the other side when I was doing these interviews, it was a person that I interviewed from the retail sector, and they said that, when they would bring in women for a 20-minute conversation about potentially having their product featured in their location, 20-30 minutes, they said, I find that women just spend so much time trying to build the relationship and have me like them, so I hear their whole story and their family's story, and that's great, and it might be a wonderful part of the marketing of the product. But what they said was, I just want to understand who buys the product, what's the demographic, how do I make the most money, what time of day are they shop, like what are the data that's going to help me make my margins. And so it's interesting because even from the other side, the retailers on the other side do notice that there's a difference between how women and men come in and present. So 5 blind spots, and these will come up in different in different ways at different stages in your negotiation. So we've talked about blind spots, we talked about the process of negotiation. Now I want to talk about the 3 things that actually make you an amazing negotiator. And these things, especially if you're a woman, you already have these. We just need to channel them. So those are your empathy, your core values, and I hope you know what I mean when I say mama bear mode, but I feel like you know what I mean when I say mama bear mode. But activating mama bear mode, that same, that fierce, protective, respectful, caring way, but on behalf of yourself and your business. So let me talk about each of these. And interestingly, empathy is the skill. So let me back up for a second. Harvard School on Negotiation is the biggest school on negotiation, the biggest center of negotiation research in the world. And the core of what they teach in that program to business graduates is empathy. So students come there from all around the world to learn primarily, yes, strategies and tactics, but empathy. Empathy is the core of negotiation. And so if you've been raised as somebody who puts others first, who sees and puts yourself in the shoes of others, you probably already have a very high experience with empathy. So empathy is about putting yourself in their shoes. So when you're sitting down with someone and you're having a negotiation, understanding things from their perspective, asking lots of questions, listening to understand, validating how frustrating it must be that margins are decreasing or that costs are rising, and offering solutions that really spell out that alignment of, well, you said that you were worried about the cost of storage. Well, I'd like to suggest that we do this, which would reduce your cost of storage and give me, maybe a higher quality product for the same price. Empathy is the heart of strategic negotiation. And I promise you, you already have this. In a minute, we'll talk about where you apply this, but you already have this. Lean into it. Core values. Okay, so core values are why you're doing this in the first place. So many of you will have a story of, why did you start that that particular business? Maybe you found that you had an allergy, your child had an allergy. I know this is the case in a lot of food development products that they're coming out of a need, right? And that need is to make sure that your kid isn't going to go into anaphylactic shock when you feed them their breakfast. It's a need to make sure your family is safe. It's a need to make sure that you can provide for your family and build a thriving business and contribute to your community. Understanding who you are and why you built this business in the first place and what drives you for the future is a really, really powerful input into your negotiation. You understanding of that and thinking about how that ladders out into the bigger picture for you. What do those core values look like of, making sure your kid is safe when they take their snacks to school every day? What does that look like in 10 years from now when you know that dream is spread across our country, when it's an international product, right? So what's the long term? What's the bigger picture? Acting in alignment with that vision is also, you'll feel it as intuition. So you might get the spidey sense of yes and no. Your core values will lead you along the path of what is a yes for you. What is something that aligns with you? They really do help you make good decisions in the moment. If you are clear on why you're doing this, and maybe a supplier or partner asks for something that's out of alignment with your core values, oh well, maybe you can change some of the ingredients, or we'll change the packaging so that it's not explicit and it doesn't speak to the consumer that you're targeting. You'll know immediately that that's a no for you. And that's because you have a strong understanding of what your core values are. And then finally, mama bear mode. So you probably already do this. If somebody, if you find your parents or your children or other loved ones, your friends find themselves in difficult situations, you are probably the first to stand up on your hind legs and protect them and step in and make sure that they experience justice. I want you to start thinking about what it would look like if you were a mama bear for your business. There's an interesting thing that happens for women in business when they hire other staff. And that is that they're able to very easily make a switch between the almost like this inability to stand up for ourselves. But then once they have staff, they're like, oh, I have to negotiate because otherwise I'm going to have to lay my staff off. Like, it becomes so black and white and so quick. I'm not saying go out and get yourself staff. I'm saying start to think about your business as something bigger than yourself, and think about defending your business like a mama bear would, making sure that you're practicing, for yourself, radical self-respect, but really focusing on channeling that not anger is a really strong word, but that frustration that maybe you're being offered a raw deal toward, no, I need to stand up for my business because nobody else is going to do it. Right. So think about your business as needing that nurturing. It needs that protection. It will come naturally if your business grows and you have staff. It will become much easier to negotiate because you're negotiating like literally on behalf of other people. But for now, if you are just a solopreneur and you're working in your space, this is a really powerful way of separating yourself from the conversation and really focusing on channeling your emotions for your business on behalf of your business. Okay, so I want to really quickly, as I wrap this up, come back to each of those steps and just point out where you're going to see the blind spots, empathy, core value pop up. So again, planning, same questions. What do you want? What do you not want? What are your deal breakers, minimum requirement, and what are you willing to give up? But when you're doing that planning, you also need to think about what blind spots might sabotage me. So in this situation with this partner, supplier, vendor, employee, whatever it is, what might come up? How do I feel about this person, this organization? And then how do I protect against that? Again, do the math. Math is magic, and doing the math actually really helps you to defend your position very easily. In discovery, this is where you're asking questions, you're doing research, and really trying to understand them. Use your empathy. This is where you want to understand them, but you also want them to understand that you understand them. You want them to know that they are heard and that their frustrations are felt, so that you can move into that negotiation with that strong connection. In the actual negotiation, the discussion, this is where I want you to, a couple of things, pay attention to blind spots because they will come up, and listen to your core values. So when they're screaming at you, that's telling you that something's off. That's a great opportunity to say, you know what, I need to pause. I feel like I need to just go back and do a little research, do some numbers. Can we connect again tomorrow, or can we connect again later today? But if your core values are like, yes, this is perfect. I love this. I can see how this is going to, help me over the long term. Then it's easy to say yes, and that's a good thing. And always keep that negotiation going. Always keep the door open. And then with confirmation, I talked about this earlier. Lots of us don't do a good job of this. We don't document things. We don't follow up. We don't get what we actually negotiated for. The reason we're doing that is blind spots. So especially trust and people pleasing. So if you've got vendors that aren't paying you, or partners that aren't paying you for purchasing your products, and you're like, oh, well, I'll just wait. That's trust. You're trusting that they're going to do due diligence. And so routine is your friend. I mean, in my business, I deal with a lot of corporations, and they have processes, and I have to assume that somebody called in sick or something happened, but I don't assume that that's okay. I don't assume that they're going to get to it. If the 30-day period on my invoice comes and goes, and my invoice hasn't been paid, I immediately, on day 31, I immediately follow up with a reminder. It's just my practice. It's not that I don't like them. It's not that I'm a jerk. It's that they had 30 days and we're now at 31. And so I want to confirm. And if I haven't heard back in 2 days, then I'm going to reply again and follow up again and follow up again and follow up again. It's a lot more work on my part, but again, profit is key. Cash is key. Cash flow really matters. So watch out for those rogue blind spots. If you find yourself thinking, I don't want to do this because somebody might not like me, that is a blind spot in play, in action for you. Couple of final tips for success. Prepare. Don't go into a negotiation without at least sitting down and going through what you really want out of it. Now, even if somebody says, hey, I can do, I had something open up this afternoon. Can you come? Still take the time to sit down, take 10 minutes to sit down and think about, what would this look like if it was amazing? Make a list, brainstorm. If you do have time in advance, call a friend. So often you'll find yourself anxious, nervous before having a negotiation. Call a friend, have somebody on call to hype you up before you go in, and help you to calm those nerves, help you to distract a little bit, run through what your plan is. Take your time. It's okay to have a few conversations. There's nothing wrong with that. That is perfectly normal. Sometimes it can be 5, 10 conversations. If it's a high value agreement, it's probably not something that you're going to solve in one conversation. In that conversation, try to find some yeses. Be really clear about what matters. This isn't a time to hide and hope that they understand what really matters to you. And one of the best things that I've done for years is keep a journal of negotiation and reflect on it periodically. It does get easier over time. It's also interesting to see, within the scope of your business, what changes over time in terms of the things that are real priorities for you. And it's so positive to look back and see how far you've come. Because, again, entrepreneurs who negotiate are the ones who build profitable and sustainable businesses. And I know that that's what you want out of all of this. And I think that, I'm 2 minutes early for questions. That brings me to the end of the presentation, but we do have time for questions. I hope that there are some questions. If you haven't thought of them yet, pop them into that Q&A right now. While I'm on this slide, I'll remind you that you can get in touch with me in a few different ways. So my email address is joanne@joannezuk.com. I have all those blogs on my website. You can absolutely please connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't just follow me, click the connect button. And then on my YouTube channel, I have a course that is small business negotiation. So if you've scanned that QR code, what you're going to get is this presentation. And then tomorrow I'm actually going to send you a second email, and it'll ask you to give me feedback on, like, just fill out a quick survey, a 3-minute survey. But I also give you a code for free access to the workbook that goes with that 3-hour negotiation course. So the course itself is free. It's part of my commitment to making content available for women and historically marginalized folks at no cost so that people can learn how to negotiate. The workbook is just a step up, and it's a lot more content that kind of helps you walk through all of the steps and helps you to prepare your negotiation strategy. So I think that brings me to the end, but I would love to hear your thoughts. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can see.
There is
Now I
no
can see myself.
questions.
No questions. Does anybody, do you have the ability to raise a hand or any other
No,
features there?
no raise hand. We remove that function.
We removed that function. Okay, maybe we'll give it another minute.
Just
Is there
a
anything
comment
in it, or
that
yes?
this is so great and thank you.
What did you find interesting, Erin?
Oh, the whole thing. I mean, I'm not in the food business, obviously myself here, but like this on the personal front of things, 100% can use this. We do have a question here. If you have a wholesaler that does your negotiations, then what do you recommend in that situation?
How do you? Sure. Yeah. So I think this is, if somebody's negotiating on behalf of you, they still need to understand what your top priorities are. I think once you get into these situations, you probably are a little bit more mature as an organization. And so I hope that you really understand your numbers, you understand what profitability looks like. But they really do need to understand, what your capabilities are, how much can you deliver, what quantities, what timing, all, like, what does your cycle allow you to deliver, so that your wholesaler isn't committing you to something that's not feasible or that's going to cost you a lot more. Absolutely. When you get into that stage of like really expanding your business to be selling nationally, or just to even to multiple locations, your inventory becomes potentially a bottleneck. So that price, obviously, what your margins are is important. So really having a good relationship with that wholesaler matters, because if they're negotiating on behalf of you, they need to understand what your non-negotiables are, what you can and cannot achieve, what would it take to be able to meet those expectations, and if there's additional cost associated with it. So yeah.
Okay, I do have another one here. You mentioned about asking for my ideal. Should I ask for my ideal plus some to allow them to reject part of what I want so that they feel that they're not?
So
Nope.
it's a great question. So your ideal is what your ideal is. In the course, I actually have some really great exercises that allow you to, like, you got to think big before you can think small. Often women especially are socialized to think about what's the minimum that I need, right? Not what's the optimal that I need. What's the minimum level that I can deal with? And if you have kids, you're like, oh, all I need is like a ham sandwich for lunch. Not I want to have that beautiful salad with lots of delicious things in it. So we're always in this space of thinking first about what do we need? What's the minimum level of what we need? And so even the way that question was asked makes me think that if you're going in thinking that that there's something beyond my ideal, that tells me that you're actually setting your expectations kind of low, that you're probably thinking about what's my minimum requirement, and you're thinking about that as your ideal. So in that course, we actually spend a lot of time walking through the difference between the two, and you need to know both, right? You need to understand if everything lined up, and I would love, what is the best deal out there? What are the terms of that agreement? And I want you to think beyond price, because we often just think about price. What would that look like? That ideal is what you're going to ask for, is the absolute amazing, perfect offer. That's what you're going to walk in hoping to get. On the other side, you're going to walk in knowing what your walkaway point is. What is the deal breaker? What's the level where you're not willing to go below that? So what's the minimum and what's the optimal? That range is where you want to negotiate within. So if you're like, oh, there's more things above that are reasonable, and I think we need to always think about what's reasonable for that partner. If there's way more above that, then maybe you haven't done the work in terms of really refining what that range is for you. Because the range should be, you know, what would be the best case scenario? And you assume you're not going to get the best case scenario. So where's the room within that you're willing to negotiate? Did I answer that question, Erin?
Yeah, sounds great. I don't have any more in the Q&A here. I'll maybe ask Annette if she's wanting to come back on. I see you're unmuted, Annette. You can just start speaking, or if you want to start your camera.
Yes, I can't seem to start my camera. Oh, there I am.
You are.
Well, thank you so much, Joanne. You gave us a lot of valuable insight and applicable tips, and I really appreciated all the applicability to our sector, the food sector. That was really great.
Thanks for
Thank you
having
all
me.
yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your participation today. We look forward to continuing to build your business skills capacity in the remaining 3 sessions. And so we will see you next week when we delve into how to build a thriving brand. Have a great day.